When we think about how wars end, we usually picture something dramatic on a battlefield, right? A final, decisive victory. But honestly, in the modern world, that's almost never how it actually plays out. The real breaking point for a country at war, it usually happens miles and miles away from any front line. So what really decides when a conflict is over? Well, let's just say it's not decided by some glorious final battle. Nope. The outcome is usually determined by these quieter forces, things happening far from the fighting. These forces don't carry guns, but believe me, they are every bit as powerful. The reality of modern conflict, especially a war of attrition, where each side is just trying to grind the other down, is that it doesn't end with some big knockout punch. It ends when one side simply starts to break. And that breaking point, it's not random at all. It follows a pretty predictable pattern. So we're going to break this down into 3 critical pressure points that really determine how long a nation can keep up a fight. First, its ability to produce munitions. Second, the stability of its markets. And third, the unforgiving clock of its politics. Yeah, think midterms. Let's start with the industrial front. All right, first up, munitions. It might seem like the most advanced militaries have this almost bottomless arsenal, right? But the truth is, behind every single precision missile, there's a long, surprisingly fragile, and incredibly expensive supply chain. Just look at the sheer economic imbalance here. It's wild. A defender might use a $4 or $5 million Patriot interceptor missile to shoot down a $20,000 drone. That is a 200-to-1 cost disadvantage. That kind of math is just completely unsustainable over the long haul. And this gets us to the production problem. A top defense contractor, in a really good year, might make about 620 of those Patriot interceptors. But check this out. In a single intense aerial attack, a defender might fire off a dozen of them. That's almost 2% of an entire year's production, gone in less than a minute. So here's the crucial point. High-tech warfare slams into industrial reality, and it happens fast. Stockpiles that took years to build up can be wiped out in a matter of weeks, and you can't just flip a switch and make more. These are complex weapons that take years to build, creating this massive, dangerous gap between how fast you use them and how fast you can make them. Okay, so that's the industrial front. The second pressure point is the markets. While factories and armies are working on a timeline of weeks, months, or even years, global financial markets react in minutes, and that creates a whole different kind of battlefield. The second a conflict even seems possible, investors don't wait around for governments to make a statement. Money instantly flies to safer assets. Shipping companies start rerouting their massive fleets, and vulnerable data centers might even get shut down preemptively. The market's verdict comes in long before the politicians have even had their first meeting. And the effects just cascade. It's a domino effect. Let's say a key shipping lane, like the Strait of Hormuz, gets disrupted. That doesn't just raise oil prices. Higher energy costs make fertilizer more expensive, which, down the line, raises the price of food at your grocery store. Regional airspace closures force airlines to take longer, more expensive routes. These aren't just abstract problems. They hit people's wallets directly and quickly. And in today's economy, this ripple effect has a brand new, very concentrated target. A massive chunk of the US economy is driven by just a handful of tech giants, the so-called Magnificent Seven. In 2023, they were responsible for 60% of the S&P 500's entire return. This kind of concentration creates a whole new kind of strategic vulnerability. See, these companies rely on enormous global data centers, and that digital infrastructure, it's now a strategic target. Attacking data centers in places like the UAE or Bahrain isn't just about knocking a few servers offline, it's a direct strike at the very heart of the American tech sector, which is a key engine of the entire US economy. And all of this leads us to the final and maybe the most powerful pressure point of all, politics. Because while you can try to resupply your armies and you can try to stabilize the markets, You absolutely cannot postpone an election. That political clock is rigid and it just keeps on ticking no matter what's happening in the world. You know how this goes. At the start of a conflict, leaders usually enjoy broad public support. But as it drags on and those economic costs we just talked about start to bite, that unity begins to fade. In the US, for instance, the next major political clock is ticking down to the November 2026 midterm elections. That date puts a hard, unavoidable deadline on any long-term conflict. This quote really just captures the whole dilemma perfectly. A war that drags on and causes economic pain at home becomes a huge political liability. A leader has to turn around and face the voters, and you can bet those voters will hold them directly responsible for the high gas prices and the inflation that the war is causing. So when you put these three pressures together, the factory, the stock market, and the ballot box, a leader's options start to narrow, and they narrow pretty dramatically over time. It's like a perfect storm. First, the industrial base just can't keep up with the burn rate of modern weapons. Then, the market volatility starts creating real economic pain back home. And finally, that fixed political calendar forces a day of reckoning at the ballot box. These three pressures all converge, and they become impossible for any leader to ignore. And this leads to the ultimate consequence. That ambitious, soaring goal of total victory quietly gets redefined. It's spun into something a lot more modest, something politically survivable, like an acceptable outcome. The mission shifts from actually winning the war to just ending it on terms that the public and the economy can live with. So it leaves us with this final question to think about. In a world where a nation's industrial capacity, its economic stability, and its political calendar have just as much say as its generals, what does it even mean to win a modern war anymore?